If you've been scrolling through endless specs, watching YouTubers argue about best speakers, and still feel stuck wondering whether the Klipsch Reference Premier bundle actually lives up to the hype, you're not alone. I've been in that exact spot comparing a handful of floor-standing options, reading the fine print on biamping, and trying to picture how a massive horn-loaded system would sit in a typical living room. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this review, I'm going to walk through the real-world experience of setting up the RP-1200 with the RP-1200SW Sub, point out the hidden trade-offs that most spec sheets gloss over, and help you decide if this is the right money outlay for your home theater. First off, the biggest thing that trips people up with Klipsch's Reference Premier line is the size of the horns. The new 9090mm hybrid Tractrix horn sounds impressive on paper, and it does deliver a noticeable lift in clarity, especially for higher frequency effects like a helicopter's rotor wash or a cinematic explosion's crackle. In a room that's roughly 1,512 feet with a decent amount of acoustic treatment, think a couple of thick curtains and a plush rug, the horn actually spreads sound evenly without creating a harsh projector screen zone. You'll notice that dialogue stays intelligible even when the bass is thumping, which is a real win for movie nights where you don't want to keep shouting over the soundtrack. That said, the horn's presence is also a practical limitation. The speaker's footprint is larger than many conventional floor standers, and the front baffle projects forward a few inches. If you have a tight wall clearance or a built-in TV that sits right up against the side, you'll need to give the speakers at least a foot of breathing room. I tried tucking them into a corner in a small apartment, and the bass became boomy while the highs started to sound a bit nasal. So, if your space is truly compact, the RP-6000 might feel like trying to fit a piano into a closet. The woofers are the next piece of the puzzle. Klipsch's all-new Cerametallic cones combine the stiffness of ceramic with the damping of metal, promising tighter transient response. In practice, the 6.5-inch drivers handle mid-bass duties with a punch that feels more muscular than muffled. I paired them with the RP-1200SW 12-inch subwoofer, and the low-end integration was surprisingly seamless. The sub's front-firing design meshes well with the floor-standing speakers, giving a cohesive boom without the usual disconnect you hear when a separate sub tries to overtake the main cabinets. When you watch an action film and a car drifts around a corner, the tire's grip and the engine's growl stay glued to the on-screen movement. Now, let's talk about the biwiring/biamping capability that Klipsch highlights. The dual input terminals let you separate the high-frequency and low-frequency signals, which can be a game-changer if you're an enthusiast who already owns a decent external amp. In my setup, I used a 2-channel amp for the main speakers and a dedicated sub-amp for the RP-1200SW, and the result was a cleaner, more defined soundstage. However, this isn't a plug-and-play feature for the average buyer. If you plan to use the included Klipsch Reference Series amplifier, you'll have to decide whether you really need to split the signal. For most users, the extra wiring step adds complexity without a perceptible gain, so I'd recommend sticking to a single set of inputs unless you have a specific amp configuration in mind. One practical strength that often gets lost in the marketing fluff is the durability of the cabinet construction. The speakers use a high-density fiberboard core wrapped in a veneer finish, which feels solid enough to survive the occasional bump from a child or a pet. The matte black ebony finish also hides dust better than a glossy white, which is a small but appreciated detail for households that don't want to spend extra time polishing. On the flip side, the finish isn't entirely scratch-proof. A sharp edge can leave a faint mark, so a simple dust cover is a worthwhile investment if you have pets that like to jump onto the cabinets. From a value perspective, the headline rating of 4.8 out of 5 stars across nearly 3,000 reviews tells you that the majority of owners are satisfied, but the real question is, satisfied with what? For a home theater that leans heavily on immersive dialogue and dynamic sound effects, think sci-fi, superhero flicks, or sports broadcasts, the RP-6000 delivers a punchy, forward-focused presentation that many audiophiles love. If you're primarily a music listener who values a neutral, laid-back tone, you might find the horns a bit aggressive, especially on bright vocals or acoustic guitars. In that scenario, a more traditional sealed box speaker could serve you better. Who should buy this bundle? First, anyone who already has a decent AV receiver and wants to upgrade the front left-right pair without diving into a full-on audiophile setup. If you have a room that can accommodate the speaker dimensions, enjoy movies that demand clear dialogue and impactful effects, and don't mind spending a little extra time on